On the surface, Ratatouille is a computer-animated Pixar film about a rat who secretly becomes a chef of a restaurant in Paris. But on a deeper level, it's about so much more. Through Remy, the film explores an appreciation for food and a willingness to chart one's own course to follow your dreams. More broadly, the film also touches on sexism, classism, and other forms of prejudice. Ratatouille is a movie that touches on several things that I love. First of all, I do not love rats. That's the first thing. Let's get that out the way. But I love Paris. It's a place that I've dreamed about seeing for years. In addition to that, I love food, as you can probably tell from my other channels. I like traveling. I love traveling. So Ratatouille is a movie that I adore. I didn't see it when it was in theaters, but I saw it sometime later and just absolutely fell in love with it. And I think it's one of these movies, right? Disney does a pretty good job with these types of movies where they create something that I would think is good for kids, right? Where kids could enjoy it, adults can as well. But I think Pixar is actually amazing at these types of films where it's like you as an adult, you're not just like completely bored out of your mind. And so I watched this for the first time like several years ago and then rewatched it for the review, and I enjoyed it just as much this time around. Basically, Ratatouille is the story of a mouse. Well, not a mouse. To be specific, a rat, because he's big, who lives in France with his family. And I guess it's called a colony, right? His dad, older brother, relatives. He lives in this rat colony with his family. And pretty much they eat trash. They eat garbage. Kind of just like whatever they happen to find. This is what they eat to survive. With no real concern for the quality of the food or the taste. It's just whatever they find, they eat it. But Remy, who is actually voiced by Oswald Patton, he has grown up seeing a chef on TV called Auguste Gusteau, who has built a cooking empire. He encourages people that they might not be chefs, but they can cook as well. They can follow his recipes. And so with that, he's built this food empire where like he has cookbooks, all kinds of products, restaurants and whatnot. He actually has a very successful restaurant in Paris. And so Remy has grown up seeing this guy who is a hero to him, which I related to because I remember being a kid who loved to watch cooking shows. And some of my favorite chefs were my childhood heroes. In watching the film, this is a Pixar movie. And I think sometimes Disney hits on this, but I think Pixar really more readily captures this thing where a lot of the Disney stories, the more popular movies are like adaptations of fairy tales. So princes, princesses, girl meets guy kind of thing. And it tends to be the same basic story across quite a number of their classic movies. And that's not taking anything away from Disney. But with Pixar, they tend to have these more original type stories. There's the surface level of what's going on, but quite often there's these deeper stories that I think resonates with a lot of people. So it's like if you think of Toy Story, Shrek, different company, but it's also along those lines where these companies are like really great at making films that are entertaining and appealing to both kids and adults. So on the surface level, it's like, here's this little rat, Remy. But, you know, there's a deeper story taking place. There's a deeper conversation about tolerance. Remy is a rat, and through his dad's experiences, well, his dad has really only had negative experiences with humans. He knows that humans kill rats. And while Remy and his family are reliant on them, they're reliant on people to sustain themselves. They try to avoid contact with them out of fear that they'll meet harm. And so Remy has developed a appreciation for Gusteau. And he kind of branches out from his colony where it's a dangerous proposition, but he actually goes into the homes of humans to explore. Really, there's like this one lady in particular whose home he visits. He spends time in her kitchen, eating and whatnot, but also uses it as an opportunity to watch television. And I think it's through that means that he became aware of Gusteau. And so he kind of branches out from his family, does his own thing, moves beyond his family. It's like there's one point in the film where he's actually separated from them for a period of time. And initially Ross, he realizes that he's beneath Paris, this place that he's dreamed of visiting because of its food culture. And so with that, he takes the opportunity to go and visit Gusteau's restaurant and is just enamored with it. But by this time, Gusteau has passed away. The restaurant has seen better days. It's experiencing a bit of a decline. And Remy happens to arrive around the same time that a young man by the name of Luigi shows up at the restaurant. Luigi finds work as, like, the garbage boy. Remy's looking for food. The two end up meeting. Remy, through his exposure to Gusteau, has learned how to cook. He's read a lot of his stuff, learned to cook from reading his cookbooks. And in addition to that, he also has some natural ability in the sense that he can take those recipes and figure out things that he can add to punch them up a little bit. It leads to, there's this underlying thing of animals, right? For you to be a chef or an aspiring chef, a food connoisseur, the last thing anyone wants in a restaurant is to see a rat, right? Second thing would probably be to see a roach. And so it's like, here's this thing. You have this creature that I really don't think any human being, especially a food lover, would want to see mucking about in the kitchen. And it turns into this whole thing where Luigi and Remy broker this relation. There's some trial and error, but they end up cooking together. This unexpected thing of a rat being in the kitchen. And it turns out that while he's kind of the front man, Luigi that is, Remy's able to use his skills to bring attention to Luigi. Luigi functions as the front man, but Remy has this talent that he's able to put to good use and brings attention to Luigi. Some of it positive, some of it negative and unwanted, where you have this guy. It's like there's this thing about critics where it actually reminds me of the movie Chef, where you have this guy who's so passionate about food. And then you have this critic who comes in, gives him a terrible review as he's honestly resting on his laurels, right? He's become kind of old-fashioned and uninteresting. There's nothing interesting going on with this restaurant. It leads to a series of events and whatnot. It leads to major life changes for the chef. And so here you have something similar, but because Remy can't stand center stage, he falls back and Luigi ends up becoming the front person for him. An extension of Remy's cooking capabilities. And so through that, Luigi starts to build a profile for himself. There's also a young lady in the restaurant, another cook, who's talented in her own right. And Luigi takes an interest in her. So it's like you have these multiple stories going on. There's this thing about sexism as the other chef, her name is Colette. She's talented in her own right. And she actually provides help and assistance to Luigi, especially when he first arrives at the restaurant. Initially, Luigi experienced some resistance, right? As when he appeared at the restaurant, he started cooking and whatnot. Skinner, who's the top chef at the restaurant, has taken over by this point as Gusteau has passed away. And so with the arrival of Luigi, he's a little put off by it because it was kind of like blocking his shot, messing up his plans for the restaurant. In addition to that, you have Colette, this female chef, very capable cook, not just capable, but a rather talented cook with good ideas. But because she's like a woman, she ends up kind of first being tasked with looking after Luigi, helping to guide him, show him things, how to function in this restaurant. But then very quickly, she's pushed aside as Luigi's profile grows. Luigi's given opportunities that Colette, despite having quite a bit of experience, these opportunities just aren't presented to her. She doesn't receive the same opportunities that Luigi does. And so with that, you kind of have this thing of sexism, right? They briefly touch on sexism as well, because you have this dynamic taking place between Colette and Luigi and Remy. There's also a bit about prejudice, right? Tolerance, where Remy and his family are rather... Remy and his family, they have these preconceived notions about humans where they're dangerous, they're not to be trusted, they're to be avoided. But then at the same time, you have Luigi and some of these other individuals who have preconceived notions about rats, in that Under no circumstances do they want them in the kitchen. And also they're regarded as being food thieves. So it's like there are these negative expectations, these negative stereotypes and beliefs on both sides. But as Remy and Luigi work together and become rather successful, they establish a successful partnership, they come to learn about each other and put aside some of those preconceived notions. Now, granted, problems do arise that result in some of these things, but it's used as an opportunity to further explore prejudice and trusting and giving people a chance. You have Anton Ego, a renowned food critic, who his presence is just ominous. It kind of reminds me of, if you've ever seen Beauty and the Beast, the guy from like the insane asylum, they have very similar demeanors. Like, you wouldn't want to be alone with this guy. He seems creepy. But he relishes ripping Gusteau apart because he's kind of like, it's not just that he's the food critic, but he's a food snob, like this very high acidity guy who like poo-poos Gusteau's idea that anyone can be a cook. And I think it was pointed out later on in the film where not everyone might be capable of being, say, a chef per se, but there is an idea that people can learn, they can experiment, and because they're capable, right? There's this conversation about like elitism where Gusteau was more approachable with his attitude towards food, more down to earth. And then you have Anton Ego, who's more of an elitist with regards to food, where he has very strong beliefs about, what counts as good food and who should be able to cook. And so in the midst of this, it's just like different themes going on. And I think the filmmakers did a really great job with taking these sometimes adult topics, which could be, in other hands, a little bit heavy. But the approach that they take here is palatable, right? I can certainly see kids watching this and it's simple enough for them to grasp. But at the same time, it's like, it doesn't talk down to them. Like, this isn't a baby film. I think you could sit like a 2 or 4-year-old down to watch this and they'd enjoy the cartoon aspect of it, the visuals of it, the action, some of the slapstick comedy and things like that. But the deeper conversations would appeal to older kids and older audiences. It's the kind of movie where, thinking back to some of those classic Disney films that I saw as a kid, and I certainly enjoyed them then, but watching them now as an adult, I realized that there were some deeper messages and conversations going on there. I think this is certainly a film that I would consider it to be a newer classic, and I highly recommend. It's a wonderful story, the visuals are incredible, and overall it's just a really cool movie that I recommend checking out.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my movie review playlist. Go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.